This is a show about getting spooked for fun, and neither one of the hosts are associated with the attractions discussed in any way, except for those skeletons in Devin's closet. Some topics may go from ghoulish to ghastly, so viewer discretion is advised. Welcome to the Great American Scream.
Adam.
Yes.
Tell me, do you feel held by this wonderful podcast that we do and our fans?
Do I feel held by our fans? Without a doubt, in my mind.
If you were to describe our relationship with our fans or our listeners, fans feels like a weird word. If you were to describe the dynamic with a visual metaphor, would you also, like I would, describe it as you have been named the Mayday princess and have been vaulted on a kind of palanquin and be carried around while your boyfriend in 7/8 girl and then gets killed?
I mean, you had me.
I had myself at the first part, and then I kind of realized.
You kind of lost me in the second part there, but I definitely feel held.
Okay, good.
Which, the more I say it sounds more gross, but I mean it in the best possible way.
It is also kind of gross.
It's kind of yucko.
Listen, we're going to live. Hi, guys. This is a Great American Scream. I'm Devin Wright.
I'm Adam O'Connell.
And in this episode, we are going to talk about the films of Ari Aster, which is very exciting.
Woo!
But that does mean that for most of this kind of 40 minutes to an hour, we're going to kind of live in this space, in this kind of weird space.
Yeah.
Where stuff is simultaneously very good and interesting and compelling, and also a
little yucko. But that's one of the reasons that I think Ari Aster is so good at what he does. That
oh, for sure.
Because okay, so we're gonna talk about Ari Aster, and you know how a lot of the focus of modern film is on catharsis. That you should feel good when the movie ends, even if the movie has a sad ending, you should take something away from it.
Right, and even if it's not something concrete, it's at the very least it's an emotional catharsis where you leave and you're okay. There's a conflation of catharsis and satisfaction, I think, a lot in today's discussion of movies. But most movies give you satisfaction, whether or not they give you catharsis.
Yeah, Ari Aster said, "Forget that."
He said, take that, throw that in the trash. Aristotle, who?
Don't need. You're going to feel catharsis.
I take Plato and I throw him in the trash. Sophocles, suck my whole butt.
You're going to feel catharsis, but you're going to feel bad that you felt catharsis at the end of these.
Yeah, you're going to have very complex emotions about the fact that you felt catharsis. Although, to be honest, and we'll talk about this, Hereditary, I felt bad about feeling catharsis. Honestly, Midsommar didn't really feel bad about feeling catharsis. Felt pretty good.
See, I felt like the opposite. Okay, we'll talk about that.
Ooh,
because
okay,
I
we'll
did make Devin watch these movies for the first time in preparation for this episode in the span of a week too. So,
yep.
Which is a lot.
Yep. Yes, you did.
Yeah. So we're going to specifically talk about his two feature film releases, Hereditary, which came out in 2018, and Midsommar, which came out in 2019. I say Midsommar. I've heard a lot of people say Midsommar. Ari Aster says both.
Yeah,
I'm gonna say Midsommar.
It can be either.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say Midsommar because it's just kind of easier.
Yeah.
To say.
Which is fair. He's one of my favorite modern horror directors, alongside Jordan Peele and alongside films like Get Out and Us. These are my top 5 horror films of the last decade.
Yeah, I think these, along with, like you said, Jordan Peele's stuff, I think it's been talked about plenty. But if you haven't heard, they kind of represent a new moment and a new direction for horror movies that I was going to say harken back to some point in the past, but I really think it is a fully new thing that takes horror film as what it is, which is, sometimes gory, sometimes silly, sometimes funny, but also elevates it. It is they're so good. They're so good.
Yeah. I think the closest thing I can compare it to would be something like Rosemary's Baby or The Exorcist, with those kind of 60s, 70s influences. And they're also, it's fantasy horror that is so grounded in reality. It's paranormal horror that could happen.
Yes, I think what I was struck by, and I said this to Ezra after watching Midsommar, was it doesn't, like, I was gonna, as a joke, have the joke of this podcast be that my position is that neither of these are horror movies. Like that.
Which is a take about these.
Yeah, and people said it about Get Out as well, less so us. But like, they are films, and they are suspense films, and they are like, but they don't do, like, your comparison to Rosemary's Baby and those kind of things is totally on in some ways, but then in some other ways, like, there's a commitment that Rosemary's Baby has to its just like wrought Satanism that like Midsommar has to its cultness,
like neopaganism. Yeah.
Right, but I feel like Rosemary's Baby has an opinion about the Satanism that is pretty clear in the filmmaking, and in Midsommar, it feels like it is just being presented. Like, it is like, not only is it just being presented, but you could, through a lot of analysis, try to find out what Ari Aster's or the other filmmakers' opinions are about what they're talking about. But instead of like framing the movie around that, they frame it around the characters that they built and how they feel about them. But they don't all feel the same way. It is really just, it is a form of storytelling and of character drama that I think horror movies has, if not never had, then has definitely strayed away from.
Yeah, and exactly that, because I think one of the things that kind of caused people to say that these aren't horror movies or they're like suspense movies is hugely in the characters, because I feel like a lot of the time when you watch a horror movie, you spend a lot of the time criticizing the character's decisions and going like, oh, if the character had just done this differently, then this wouldn't have happened, or oh, you're so stupid, you ran upstairs, you should have ran out, and that's why you died. That never happens in any of these movies. These characters never make a dumb decision or like a life-ending decision. And like, I want to say like this stuff just kind of happens to them, but not as in they don't have any agency. Like, this is how it was going to shake out for them because of who they are as a character, not because of dumb decisions that they make.
Yeah, and I think like the clearest time that I felt like I was like, hey, don't do that, and we can get into this in the plot summary, was the couple in Midsommar who like try to leave.
Oh yeah.
Which, like, that's not a bad decision, but splitting up and therefore having, I think his name is Simon, like, quote unquote, be taken to the train station before, I'm forgetting her name
Connie.
too. I'm not going to remember any names.
It's
Connie.
okay. I have them all.
That is like a, why did you do that thing? But it also makes so much sense. Like, you are freaking out and trying to run away and you like need to go grab your bag. The other one is the guy who goes into the room with the book and tries to take a picture.
That's a big one.
That one is like, why did you do that?
It's a very straightforward kind of dumb horror decision.
Yeah, you don't think... I think there is an argument to be made that it is a bit out of character for him to do that with the dynamic they set up between him and Garbage Boy Stinkman, which
Christian.
is what I'll call the boyfriend. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, it's still a moment that you can justify like within the character and the story being told. Which again, is not something that a lot of other movies do.
Yeah, so before we get too deep into the two films specifically, I want to talk a little bit about Ari Aster as like a person and director and how he got here. And then also just this episode is going to be like more of a film analysis-y kind of episode than we usually do. So let us know if you like it and we could do more of these in the future. Or if you don't like it and we won't do it again.
We'll never do it again.
Let's talk about Ari Aster a little bit. So if you haven't seen his films or heard about him, he is a director who had his first two feature film releases in the past few years, both Hereditary and Midsommar, and they both just slapped so hard, like that people
incredibly hard.
They just didn't know what to do themselves. They were so good. I especially remember when Hereditary came out and people were losing their marbles. But so he tends to work pretty closely with the studio A24, which is a pretty recent, like newish film distributor known for films that air on the surreal and artsy side. They're not like art house films, but they definitely have the inspiration. So like Tusk in 2014, which is a human centipede style film about a man who gets turned into a walrus. Great movie. Highly recommend. Ex Machina in 2015. The Witch in 2016, another banger of a horror movie. The Lobster in 2016, which is
another great movie.
Yeah, about a society where if people don't find love fast enough, they get turned into animals. Swiss Army Man in 2016, about a man who befriends a dead body on a deserted island and then uses that body as a multi-tool. And the body is played by Daniel Radcliffe. Also highly recommend. Lady Bird in 2017, The Florida Project in 2017, The Disaster Artist in 2017, and then recently in 2019, both The Lighthouse and Uncut Gems. It's just nothing but bangers.
Yeah, there's people make fun of A24 a lot because they do definitely have a style, even though a lot of their movies are disparate in terms of tone and subject matter and structure. All of them have a kind of visual style that's very similar, and it's kind of a joke to like make fun of like, I don't know, sophomore film projects as like A24 fodder. But like the reason, as always, the reason that A24 is made fun of is because it is so successful and all of the movies that they make are, if not like objectively good, at least doing something and doing something very well.
Yeah. And I'm sure they've made some clunkers. Like I literally just picked the films from the list that I know about and love.
The fact that you only picked the ones you liked or thought were good and there are all of these, like that tells you something.
They also are behind Euphoria and John Mulaney and the Sack Lunch Bunch. Literally, yeah. So Aster is 34 years old currently and from New York City. And he describes this moment where he fell in love with horror movies, that he went to go see the Dick Tracy movie in 1990, when he was 4. And he saw a character fire a Tommy gun with this wall of fire behind him, which is a very A24 shot. And then he ran out of the theater terrified, and his mom had to chase him down the street. And that's kind of...
Disney really wanted Dick Tracy to be a big hit, and they planned a amusement park ride in MGM Studios, and it did not work out.
They did do a stage show, though, and the villains were walk-around characters.
Good for them.
Terrifying photos online of that, by the way, because they wore these like prosthetic masks, that like rubber masks. So like they were kind of they were people, they were face characters, but they were kind of articulated, but they also weren't because their faces weren't really moving. Like it worked on stage, but when they walked around the park, it was very frightening. That's not what we're talking about, but fun fact.
We should do, side note, we should do an episode about scary walk-around characters.
Just uncanny about, okay. So yeah, he's got an MFA from the American Film Institute Conservatory. Generally seems like a cool dude. And after doing a couple of short films, he premiered his first feature film at Sundance, a little number called Hereditary.
Heard of it?
So we are going to talk about that one first.
Hooray!
Obviously, spoilers. And if you haven't seen this movie, I highly recommend watching it first. But a fair warning, it is very dark and very sad. Like in terms of tragedy, it's one of the most devastating, not just horror films, but just like films I have ever seen.
Yeah, I planned on watching it in the order Adam told me, but then when I was in the mood to watch a movie, I wanted to watch Midsommar first because I was excited to, and so I did, and I watched Hereditary second. Don't do that.
Go the other way around.
Do it the other way around.
Yeah, I saw both of them in theaters, which Hereditary in the theater was a wild experience. But so Hereditary has been described as a family drama that becomes a horror film or is disguised as a horror film. Like at its core, it's a family drama.
I'd agree. I think that Midsommar shares that. They both have this kind of energy, and it's why my brain is like, this is not a horror movie. It's like 45 minutes into the dang film, you're like, nothing's scary. Like, Ari Aster has this thing in both movies where you are, like, there's terrible stuff that happens. The beginning of Midsommar is horrible, but you're sitting there knowing that this is going to freak you out at some point, and that suspense, which he keeps going not only through, like, slightly off cinematography or a lot of the time very interesting color grading.
Yeah.
Like in Hereditary, it is less prominent than in specifically, again, the beginning of Midsommar. But Hereditary has this thing where the dark shots are graded in such a way that only certain colors are really visible, which shouldn't be possible in a dark shot, but it's so good. Yeah,
so it was released in 2018, and it stars Toni Collette, who it was bonkers that she did not get nominated for an Oscar for this movie.
I'm mad to this day.
Because
people don't appreciate horror.
My God. Alex Wolff of the Naked Brothers band.
Of the Naked Brothers band fame. Alex Wolff, if you're out there, every time I see you on screen, I get slightly angry because I've always had a crush on you. And I'm very, very mad that you're so successful, but good for you.
Millie Shapiro, who actually got she got a honorary Tony Award for playing Matilda on Broadway.
Oh yeah, I knew I recognized her.
Yeah.
She's also just very good. Like,
and then
actors
also Gabriel Byrne as the dad, who kind of gets like, he doesn't get as much screen time, but his performance is still like stellar. I think that like
our time with you
it.
Was brief.
Yeah,
but we enjoyed it all the same.
And it is about a family haunted by a mysterious presence after the death of their grandmother. And Aster calls it a tragedy that curdles into a nightmare, which sounds like appropriate.
Yeah, it is literally like it starts at tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
Like it starts there and then it gets worse.
Which I guess... No, go ahead.
That is something that a lot of horror movies don't do because they want, a lot of them bank on, and this is not a bad thing, it's done very well very often, but they bank on the beginning of the movie being normalcy. And a lot of the time, like that first scene gives you something a little bit scary or like sets you up to kind of set up that suspense and be super scary. The first scene of Get Out is a good example. Mm-hmm. And then bring it way back down to normal.
Yeah.
Hereditary doesn't really feel like it ever...
No,
I'm always like,
when you start on the level of tragedy that Hereditary does, the only place to go is horror. Like you can't come back from that.
You can't.
You just can't.
Which is why it doesn't.
Yeah. So, you might get through the first hour and a half of Hereditary thinking it's a tragedy and also kind of a thriller, but then the head first nosedive it does into horror in the last 45 minutes is perfect.
And it goes buck wild.
Yeah.
We'll get to it.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So it starts off with the death of the family's grandmother, Annie, who is played by Toni Collette, her mom. And Annie is a miniature artist, which gives this film all these amazing moments of how she works. She says she works with the miniatures and she recreates the scene of her mom in the hospital and stuff to give her she says to give her an objective view of what happened, and she says that about the tragedy that happens later too. And it also gives us these awesome shots of the house looking like a dollhouse and them looking like miniatures. At one point we zoom in on her miniature and then we're it seamlessly transitions into being in the actual bedroom.
Oh yeah, we all pooped on tilt shift photography in 2012, which fair because it was everywhere and the Sherlock opening ruined it. And this movie, Ari Aster waited just long enough to be able to do it again. And I have a thing for movie moments, and you will definitely relate to this, I think, Adam, that feel like something, just kind of scenes that feel like you can feel them. The one that I have always gotten people to latch onto is the scene in Toy Story 2 when Woody is being cleaned.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The tactile,
yeah, you can just feel it.
Yeah.
You know? And all of the scenes where you are seeing miniatures being worked on or miniatures in those feel tactile to me.
Mm-hmm. There's something else I was going to say about it, but it really gives a sense of that these characters are in this dollhouse or this miniature house because they're being controlled by an outside force, which is exactly what's happening to them. Spoiler alert. So she's married to Steve, who is a psychiatrist, and they have two kids, Peter, who I think is 15, 16. He's in mid-high school.
Somewhere.
And then Charlie, who is 13. So Peter and Annie and Steve don't feel very saddened by the grandmother's death because they were so kind of detached from her. She was very secretive. Even at the funeral, they say we don't recognize anybody here. We were shocked that so many people came. And there's a reason for that. But Charlie is pretty upset because she was her grandmother's favorite. And Charlie's a little odd. She walks around doing this kind of this clucking noise, and she makes these little craft sculptures out of trash, and then she cuts the head off a pigeon in another scene. You get the idea that something's going on with Charlie. It's so well done because it's not even outwardly evil. You're not oh, she's gonna be the villain or the demon child, but there's just something up with her.
Yeah, and I'm super quiet.
Yeah.
And the thing about the film style is that those kind of moments are everywhere. Like that is definitely the most pronounced. Is her kind of like offness, and you definitely bump on it a lot. But every character has some moment like that, where you're like, is that? Wait a sec. What? Are you?
Yeah.
Are you gonna? And then the movie just moves on, and it is. It's wild.
And then we get one of our first scenes, I think, of how Ari Aster does paranormal horror so well that Annie sees this apparition of her grandmother in Charlie's room. And it's not like the typical ghost effect of like, oh, it's like some moving apparition, or it's like clear or white and blue and kind of like a wisp. It's just like a very still image of her mother, barely overlaid in this like dark shadowy corner that goes away when she turns the light on. Like if you were watching on a darker screen, you wouldn't even notice it was there. Which I think is
and that's one of those
totally
moments
the
where
kind
you're
of
like,
thing you'd see in real life, like you'd think you saw in real life.
Yes, exactly. And it's like a use of the film, like a use of film technique to be like, you know what these kind of things usually look like on film. And you also know what they're supposed to look like in real life, quote unquote. And we're going to like ride that line, which is so cool.
It's not corny. Like, honestly, I think a lot of paranormal horror gets a little corny with the way that it does ghosts. And this is totally not.
For sure. Yeah. And again, there's a lot of, the only reason that the effect in Hereditary works is because for years and years, horror movies have unabashedly and full-throatedly done corny stuff because it is effective. Yeah. It's not that it's like bad.
I love corny
anything,
stuff.
But corny stuff is great. But like the effectiveness of doing this so intelligently and so well, and A24 in general has a kind of reputation for doing very interesting but often subtle visual effects that are either incredibly effective or purposefully not. Like this one is incredibly effective because it is so subtle. The kind of opposite end of the spectrum is the head, the head prosthetics in Midsommar are very much not realistic, and that is like worked to the benefit of the film. And it's so good.
Yeah. So later on, Peter gets invited to a party, but he tells his mom that it's like a school barbecue. So she's like, "Oh, bring your sister." Charlie is again just doing this like tongue pop noise that everybody saw in those trailers. So Peter takes her, he gets high at the party, and then Charlie, who has a nut allergy, unknowingly eats a cookie that has nuts in it, and she starts to go into anaphylactic shock. So Peter, who is high, tries
the worst fear of any person who has a sibling with allergies.
Yeah. That's what the horror is so real. Okay, so Peter is high and he's trying to drive her home or drive her to the hospital. And she can't breathe, so she sticks her head out the window to try and get some air. And then Peter sees a deer in the road and he swerves, and there's a pole next to the road, and this 13-year-old girl gets decapitated by this pole, like 30 minutes into the movie.
This movie is, it is so, and this is something I wrote down during Midsommar, and I was like, I hope this is true in Hereditary too. And it is my like main thing about Ari Aster's films is that the tone, like people kind of fetishize consistency of tone, or at least consistency of tone changes. Ari Aster takes all that crap and throws it in the toilet where it belongs. He like will shift tones so quickly.
Yeah.
Like it is jarring on purpose. It's not jarring in a like unartistic or poor way. It just hits.
Yeah. And
you think like, oh, anaphylactic shock. Okay, that's the thing. Okay, this is a crisis. This is like part of the rising action, of the rising tension that's going to lead to eventually a really harsh like horror thing. But no, you get 5 minutes into the kind of low tension thing and her head is gone.
Yeah. I have never like ever been so shocked by something that has happened in a horror movie. Like you could feel it in the like I wish I could sit in the theater. I mean, I don't wish because it was so horrible, but like to feel it again in the theater, this collective audience tension of like, oh my God, like they just did that and it was horrible. But anyway, so Peter goes into shock and drives home and doesn't tell his parents because he's in shock. And his mom only finds out the next morning when she leaves the house and she sees Charlie's decapitated body hanging out the window of the car. And you get this, like, again, Toni Collette leaving it all on the floor, absolutely crushing it, in this, like, raw, horrendous depiction of grief. And then there's this gutting shot at the funeral where they're lowering her coffin into the ground. And, it's it's so uncomfortable to sit through, but it's so good. And just how
I don't like
tragic it is.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just saying how tragic it is.
Yeah, I hate squirmy, like, embarrassing, kind of like uncomfortable moments in film.
Yeah, me
and
too.
Yet, like, things like this that are done so effectively I told Ezra this, like, knowing, because of the way the film is written and talked about and portrayed to you, knowing that you're supposed to feel uncomfortable is like a lot of uncomfortable parts in film and TV, especially like comedy, kind of is trying to surprise you by making you uncomfortable. Like, that's supposed to be something that you feel uncomfortable because you didn't expect it to go this way. This film doesn't do that to you. It literally sets up, like, this horrible stuff has happened, you've been shocked, and now you're going to sit in this feeling, and that's what we want you to do.
Yeah.
And that's okay, because this is a movie. It's all play. It's all pretend. Doesn't matter. It's a film. Like, it's so good.
Yeah, and this is where everything starts to unravel, both in, like, the family drama and the paranormal aspect of it, because, like, so Peter has PTSD from the incident and keeps, like, re-hallucinating it, and Annie tries to go to, like, group grief therapy, and she can't, but then she meets this other woman named Joan who, like, befriends her and tries to comfort her. There's that devastating scene at the dinner table when they all just kind of crack, and Toni Collette gives that, like, "I am your mother" monologue that everybody sees.
Very no wire hangers energy.
It's so good. And then Joan invites Annie to the seance. She's like, you need to do this because I can contact my dead grandchild by doing this. And it works. Like, it's just straight, like, floating chalk writes "I love you, Grandma" on the board. And she was like, you need to do one of these that contacts Charlie. And then Annie starts to have these sleepwalking incidents where she hallucinates Peter dead and then accidentally tells him that she tried to have a miscarriage and she was pregnant with him. And she says these nightmares where her family members are covered in paint thinner, and she lights a match. And then, it just... all of the, and, like, at first they seem unrelated. It doesn't stop, and they seem unrelated. Like, this is just, like, very intense processing of grief, but then when the payoff, when you realize what's going on, it all makes sense.
Yeah. For sure. It is like, it's exactly that. It's playing into the, like, grief-stricken flashes of images. I think, like, even the end of, like, Neon Genesis Evangelion, where you have all these slightly related flashes of imagery that all eventually come together. This one, it happens so quick that you're like, oh, wait, whoa. And then by the end of it, you're like, okay, these are all connected. It doesn't take time for that connection to become clear, which is so cool.
Yeah, so basically everything starts to unravel, and it gets more and more horrifying until Annie realizes that her mother was basically, like, I don't want to say like a witch, but like a cult leader of some kind. And she had intended for this demon called King Payman to occupy the body of one of her children, and it had to be a male child. So she used Charlie as kind of like an incubator for Payman, and that clucking noise Charlie would make indicated when she was, like, being possessed by Payman.
Pavlov's cluck. Yeah,
exactly. And so when Charlie died, Payman went to Peter, because, like, there's a scene where it says that Payman, like, the host has to be, like, broken down emotionally and physically for it to happen. So there's a scene where Peter gets, like, half possessed and, like, bashes his head against his desk and breaks his nose.
Again, visceral scene.
So good. So then Annie goes up and she finds her mother's body in the attic, like, surrounded by candles. And then Annie tries to burn this book of Charlie's drawings to end everything, because, like, and it's so good because then, like, it's also emotional closure.
Right.
But when she does it, Steve, the husband, goes up in, like, she tosses the book in the fire and Steve goes up in flames. And there's this amazing shot of them standing in the living room and him on fire and Annie just staring in shock until Payman possesses her, and then she becomes blank-faced.
It is literally that shot from Dick Tracy, but, like, made artistic and interesting. Like, made meaningful.
And so then we get to the finale and it goes down. So that night, Peter finds the burnt body of his dad next to the fireplace. And then his mom chases him up to the, because she's possessed. So she like chases him up to the attic, and then he sees her hanging from the ceiling, sawing at her neck with piano wire, in another amazing, just straight up horror shot. And then this has like broken down Peter enough that becomes fully possessed by Payman, and then goes up to Charlie's treehouse where he sees his grandmother's cult stark naked, and a statue of King Payman.
Just out.
Yeah, and a statue of King Payman with Charlie's head on top. And they put the crown on Peter's head, and it's revealed that he's actually possessed by Charlie, who is also Payman, so it's not really revealed. Right. It's like the one thing about the movie that I don't get.
It's like it's supposed to, and obviously, you know, like decoding metaphor is not the point of artistic analysis, and we don't really need to. But I believe anyway that it's like the whole point is that Charlie was always Payman. Like that's always been the case. And that like it's just a reinforcement of this has been happening for so long.
Yeah, and the film ends with the cult going, "Hail Payman," and then it zooms out to like this dollhouse kind of view of the treehouse, and then the movie ends.
And then the star goes over it like the Disney logo.
And
it was all
so good.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like it's about grief in the most horrendous, tragic way that you can make something about grief.
Right. And it is not about, you know, a lot of movies about grief are you like watch the characters process or fail to process. And in that process, you get to like find a quote unquote more perfect, less flawed way to do the same thing about whatever you're grieving about or whatever. In this one, it literally just from start to finish is like grief is horrible and terrible and it'll tear you apart. Watch these people get torn apart by it. Yeah. It doesn't like present you and the fact that the movie is meta-theatrically a statement about why you should process your grief, right? That it like you can't let it fester. But the film doesn't say that.
Yeah. And there's
it's
nothing.
Just the existence of the film does.
There's nothing this family could have done to prevent this fate. Like,
right.
Which might be unsatisfying for some people, but to me, then it's like you're not. The movie's characters aren't telling you to process your grief. The existence of the film is.
Yeah. Oh God, it's so good.
Okay, so now I want to talk about Midsommar, which
let's do it.
Came out in 2019, which I think like right now I would call my favorite horror movie just ever.
Yeah.
It's just so good. It stars Florence Pugh, again, giving the performance of a lifetime. No Oscar nomination. When will the Academy respect horror movies? Never.
Never. I talked about her performance in that, like, in acting school, you talk a lot about, like, crying and whether it's a thing that, like, you should be able to do on command or whether it's, like, just kind of a cheap trick that a lot of actors use. She utilizes crying in such a fascinating way as an actress. Like a lot of people like prepare for crying scenes for like 20, 30 minutes. And then that way, when the cameras start rolling, you are already like at the peak of your cry so that you can just kind of break into it. She is able to just like pull you along through the entire process of crying. It's so incredible.
It stars her,
it's so good.
Jack Rayner, William Jackson Harper of The Good Place fame. I'm gonna hope I pronounce his name right. Wilhelm Blumgren.
Yeah, probably.
And Will Poulter. And it follows a. I know. As soon as I saw him on screen, I was like, "It's that guy."
Yeah.
It follows a group of American, I think they're grad school students. They're working on a thesis, so at least some of them are, who traveled with their Swedish friend to his home commune, a neopagan cult that celebrates a Midsommar festival every 90 years. All the while, our main character, Danny, deals with the death of her entire family and a relationship that she has no emotional investment in anymore, and neither does her boyfriend.
Yeah.
And this, I think, is really the epitome of like the anti-catharsis, where you still get the catharsis and the relief of like facing the trauma, but you feel icky about it at the end. Like you feel gross.
I don't like, we talked about this. I don't know what it is about this film that, like, I think I said about 40, maybe 30 minutes before the end, I was like, is this movie just going to be unabashedly pro-cult? Like, is that just what's going to happen? And I was so in it. I was in for that. And at the end, I kind of was like, I felt catharsis watching this movie, and I didn't feel bad about the catharsis afterwards.
That's the big thing about this film is I think a lot of people take it as pro cult, but her at the ending, and if you read the script too, it says something like that, like she smiles, like, and a smile that can only be smiled by like someone who is like giving themselves up to insanity. That it's the whole idea of what cults are, is that you're going to feel held and loved, and you're going to feel like you're being supported and facing your trauma, maybe even more than you are by your friends and family, especially when you have friends and family that's dead and friends that are so empty and void of empathy as the people that she's traveling with are. But in the end, it's still a cult that is controlling what she thinks.
Oh, for sure. Mm-hmm. I don't mean it in the kind of like, dude, bro, I gotcha, this movie's pro cult way. I mean, like, the structure of the film and the way that we are presented with the characters, kind of like, because the meme of like, do you feel held, is, not just talking about the romantic relationship she's in, but also about the family that she's now lost and whether she can have a new family in this cult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we keep going back, like, that's one of the words that triggers her panic attacks when, like, Pele says, like, this is my family, and she realizes that she doesn't have one.
Right. And at the end, there are obviously, like, there are moments towards the end where there are beats that seem like they're saying, oh, look, remember, it's still a cult, and there's stuff that's wrong with that. And obviously there's stuff wrong with cults.
You're coming off weirdly pro cult.
Right. But in the journey of specifically Danny, like, which is what the movie is about, which kind of gets into the kind of inherent problems with trying to take on big, and it doesn't mean it can't happen. It just means it's very difficult to take on big systemic problems or issues through the lens of a film in a film culture that is generally individualistic by nature, because we are following usually one person's story, at least primarily. So like for Danny, like we see moments of she thinks she has this family, but then that family in some way betrays her by allowing her boyfriend to inseminate a girl who put her pubic hair into his food. Yeah. But that betrayal is presented at a time in the movie where we kind of feel like even if she doesn't know it, she has grown past him. And the other moment that I think of is at the end during the burning, and we'll get to this. Yeah. That the two members that sacrifice themselves begin to scream that they still feel pain, whatever you either anesthetic or poison or whatever is not effective. It's just something that they tell themselves to think that they're giving them a painless death when they're actually not. And then the cult starts to like scream and wail so that they're sharing the pain with the people in the pyramid. Like those are all meant to be moments that are like, hey, not as good as you thought. You thought we were going to be totally pro cult, but turns out there's still stuff wrong. And I just don't know if that tracks in the kind of emotional journey Danny's put through. Like while the script says like a smile that you can only have if you've given into insanity, like I would argue that the kind of another main thrust of this film is that there's another form of insanity that comes from the kind of system outside of this commune that is super bad and doesn't treat mental illness correctly or well enough, or doesn't provide people with the kind of emotional or mental support that they need, and feels as though communities like this are other enough that they can be exploited for academic laudatories or whatever. Shut up, Siri. I'm trying to talk. I just think that it's much, much more complicated than most of the kind of discourse about it is, which, of course, that's all art and that's all internet discourse. Yeah. But I came out of this feeling pretty good for her because, yeah, she may be crazy, but at least she, like, came by it honestly, I guess.
Yeah, we'll talk about the whole, like, good for her thing, too, when we get towards the end of it. But, like, let's dive into the movie a little bit more.
Sure.
Ari Aster has also said that he based a lot of the film on a difficult breakup that he had, which is very apparent. The film feels like a toxic breakup, a like horrible, not well done toxic breakup. And it's also a folk horror movie, like being based around a lot of like, or at least in the aesthetic of tradition and folklore. And it takes place almost entirely in bright, sunny, colorful scenes that are nonetheless horrendous, but they do it like super well as like movies like The Wicker Man did it. So the film, it starts off with the death of Danny's family and a murder-suicide by her sister. And she is, of course, traumatized by it, while her like emotionally detached boyfriend, Christian, tries to help, even though his friends have been telling him to break up with her because he's not in it anymore either.
Right.
And then months later, Danny is still dealing with her trauma, and she finds out that Christian is traveling with his friends, Mark and Josh, to the home country of their friend Pelle in Sweden for the Midsommar festival. The commune is called the Harga, and then Christian invites her after she finds out about it because he feels bad.
Right. And then Pele has a moment with her that's like, no, actually, I'm very glad you're going.
Yeah.
There is a kind of like, and again, I think it's like supposed to parallel the cultishness of Harga, that these like Christian has a moment where he's like, oh, I invited her just because, but she's going to say no, like, don't worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like assuming that she is going to kind of conform to the social mores that quote unquote should be in place. And then you have a moment where Pele's like, no, actually, I'm very glad you're coming.
Yeah.
And she ends up coming anyway.
Yeah. But in that as well, Pele is doing what any introductory member to a cult would by initiating her, by trying, like he says, like later on when he talks to her, he's like, my parents are dead too. And like, I know how you're feeling. And like, I think this is going to be good for you. And I want you to do this with me. Very much.
Right. But that's not just a cult thing. That's also what somebody might do if they were genuinely. Yeah.
It's not just a thing a cult do.
Yeah, that's another thing that the film is definitely making a point of, is that like as odd and as kind of wacky as Harga is portrayed, the kind of tactics used are not uncommon in normal life. It's just that under certain circumstances utilized by certain people, even people in not quote unquote like weird Swedish cults, but also like Scientology is the same.
But so they travel to Sweden. She has like several panic attacks on the plane and on the way there.
Oh my God, shot.
Yeah.
This is my favorite shot in the whole movie, where she starts to have a panic attack when Pele is talking to her in the apartment when they're talking about going to Sweden. And she's like, no, I probably won't come. And he's like, no, you should come. And she's like, okay, I need to leave, and starts to have a panic attack and runs into the bathroom. The cut that happens is like as the door closes, as she's in the bathroom, it cuts to her face coming up from the sink, and we see she's in an airplane bathroom.
Yeah.
Like that. So oh my God, it is so good. It is such an incredible shot.
Yeah. And they arrive in Sweden and they meet up with some of Pele's friends and they take mushrooms, which is not only a great scene cinematically with the way they do, like you see like psychedelic trips in movies all the time. This one's pretty well done. Like I've never taken magic mushrooms, but from what I have heard that this is pretty similar to what an actual trip would be like. But this also is where the movie gets into some weird instances of humor that we don't get in Hereditary. Like,
oh my God, yeah.
So when they're all tripping, and Mark, who is kind of like the comedic relief character, he's like the fool. They're all sitting on the hill, and Mark, they see this old man walking towards them in the distance, and there's a shot of him too that you think like, oh, this old man, like we're about to get into horror territory. Yeah. This old man is about to come do something to them, and Mark starts freaking out. He's like, I can't have a new person right now. And this old man finally gets to them, and he just goes, hi, and he keeps walking.
Yeah, and Mark has this moment where he's like, can everybody lie down? I'm just gonna lie down. And then he lies down, and then he opens his eyes and he goes, you need to lie down. It's
like,
so funny.
It's funny, and you kind of feel like bad for laughing because of everything else that's going on, but it's funny.
Yeah. And the again, on the visual effects, they are just like very subtle spirals going on outside of the focal point of the shot, and it's so interesting. Yeah. Again, like Adam and I are probably the two NYU students the least equipped to talk about how accurate any kind of drug is in any film, because we're the most milquetoast vanilla boys who love Jesus and hate drugs of all of them.
But so yeah,
apparently it's good.
They also meet Simon and Connie in this scene, who are an English couple that were brought by Pele's brother Ingmar. And they arrive at the commune, and it seems really lovely. It's like all these wooden buildings and these fields of flowers. There's children
And
playing.
gorgeous architecture.
Yeah, they get food and drinks. And we also get a couple more instances of that weird comedy, like when they're walking by and they see a bear in a cage, and Mark goes like, "What's up with the bear?" And Ingmar goes, "It's a bear."
It's a bear. And Ezra multiple times, and I did it too, throughout the movie was like, okay, the bear's going to come eat that person now. Okay, the bear's going to, and then there is a payoff for the bear and it's whack.
Yeah.
Also the scene that like we arrive at the commune, they set up this movie again, like how Hereditary is a family drama. This is set up as like a relationship drama, like a romantic drama, because you meet Simon and Connie, and they're very clearly in a normal movie would just serve as a like model to Danny as like an actual caring relationship that should teach her that her boyfriend's a big poop. And Pele also has that, like he's supposed to represent somebody who actually cares for her in a very clearly, like very thinly veiled indictment of the like, he's just a sweet boy who wants to like save her from the mean man, which is stupid and misogynistic. And the movie knows that. And also that move is not one to save her from this poop man. It's to bring her into a cult.
Yeah, exactly. And we also get another instance of the weird, like not only the bear humor, but when they all get into the big place where they sleep. And like they, up till then, Pele and Ingmar have been the only ones who speak English. So they've been translating for like the elders and stuff. And they get in and they're looking around this gorgeous room where all the beds are. And this girl comes in to all the Americans and she's like, "The children are in the barn watching Austin Powers. If you want to join them."
The children are watching Austin Powers, which is, the question is, are they watching Spy Who Shagged Me or are they watching Goldmember?
Yeah, that's
or
fair.
are they watching the first one that I didn't know
International Man of Mystery.
Sure.
Okay, so the next, however, Christian also forgets Danny's birthday. Pele gives her a drawing of herself. Yeah. He's like, "Oh, I only do this for birthdays," which we see later is not true because he's like drawing her later. And then Christian realizes that he forgot and gives her like a lame slice of cake in a very good, just well acted scene.
Oh, it's so good.
And the next day, the group witnesses one of the Harga's traditions, the Arastupa, which in any member of the commune over the age of 72 throws themselves off a cliff, as that is seen as the end of life in the Harga society. They say like, "Oh, you're in your summer, your spring, your fall, and your winter, and when you reach the end of your winter, you have to die." And so a woman and a man have to do it. The woman throws herself and dies on impact, but the man survives and breaks both of his legs.
Yeah, because she has good form. To be clear, she goes head first, which is obviously the way you do it. The man, the second that he jumped off, Ezra and I were like, he's not going to die. What the hell? Why would you do that? The whole point. And as you're about to talk about, like, the commune members, when he falls, start to wail, which is a thing that comes back later, that they're like sharing his pain, right? Yeah. That they're showing empathy, and then somebody comes forward and smashes his head with a big wooden mallet, and it's wild, and Danny starts to have a panic attack, and Simon and Connie start to go wild, and like, they just killed themselves. And one of the elder women tries to calm them down and is like, this is a cherished tradition. They literally, and this is again,
it's a great honor to do this.
And it is a great like moment in the film where there is a kind of acknowledgement that there are cultural traditions that are odd to certain people and would be seen as somehow cruel or wrong, and that are actually, when you think about it and you talk to the people who do it, it is not that. And like, I would put this one in the okay part of the camp. Like, I'm sure that if the people at Harga were real, they would find it disgusting and cruel to have like euthanasia and do it through like injection or turning off a machine, that is just as disgusting to them. And I think somebody, Christian, says this, but it is very clearly I have a lot of feelings about Christian in that he is too excusatory of the cult stuff.
Yeah.
In a dismissive way. But this dismissal at least makes some sense that they probably think it's disgusting to leave elders to just age in old homes.
Mm-hmm.
But what I think actually gets the explanation really right is like there's a child who's just been born and that baby has the same name as one of the elders who's just died. Like this is a very genuine belief that you are passing your spirit on to that next person, which is just like it's a neat moment.
Yeah, and I love that the movie brings this up because I imagine that this is a thought any like normal audience member of this movie would be having of like, this is true that we say that like we don't want to push our cultural traditions on another culture, but on the other hand, like people are dying. Like I love that the movie brings it up instead of just like leaving it in like the subtext for like the audience to decide. They openly discuss it.
And also leave it for annoying video essayists on YouTube to complain about.
So Pele attempts to comfort Danny in the "Do you feel held by him" scene, which again, great scene, and in like a normal like relationship drama movie would be the scene where like she would start to see that like she belongs to somebody like Pele instead of Christian. But again, is it just another cult tactic that Pele, and whether or not Pele actually has feelings for her is up for debate. Because throughout the movie he does seem quite genuine, but then like we find out at the end that his job was to lure people to the cult so they could become sacrifices, which, not to get ahead of ourselves, we'll get to that. But I also like that the movie kind of leaves that open to talk about too. Like obviously he is luring her with the cult stuff, but maybe he does also in addition have feelings for her.
Right. And it's kind of portrayed as like him not being particularly effective. Like he obviously found her and brought her there and she becomes the May Queen, and that's really good. But there's the moment that I think Danny like gives in and is like, oh, wait, I do feel held, is not a moment with Pele. It's the moment after she's walked in on Christian towards the end of the film and is then held by the group of girls who like start to wail with her.
Which is my favorite scene in the movie, which we'll talk about it when we get to it.
It's such a good scene.
Good.
Yeah.
But
we can keep going.
Yeah, so Josh begins his work on his thesis on the Harga, and then Christian decides to pick the same topic, so they have like an academic rift between them. And I think Josh says like, you don't even know how to use JSTOR, which is very funny.
And Josh and Christian are such well done characters.
Yeah.
Like I really think that Josh is like the character with whom most people are like, oh, that guy kind of makes sense. Like he obviously spent a long time like researching this stuff, and he knows what the Atastupa is before they do it.
But he doesn't tell them, which is a very telling of his character.
Yes. And you also have the sense that he genuinely cares about like the commune's feelings about him doing his work and wanting to do it respectfully. Yeah. And then the second that somebody else says, I'm going to do that too, which to be fair, Christian is doing it in a totally, again, too dismissive, too excusatory, kind of gross, oh, this is just a neat place, I'm going to reap it for a thesis. Then he's like, oh, actually, this is my thing, so screw you. It is like you would think that if they were going to have a character that was, or they wanted to talk about the academic intrusion upon certain cultural institutions, that there would be one character who did the thing that Christian did, but they did two of them, both being in the wrong, but in totally different ways. And it is so fascinating.
Yeah, and also at this time, Simon and Connie try to leave, but an elder tells Connie that Simon has left without her. They were like, oh, there's only room in the truck for one, so we took Simon, and we're going to take you now. So Connie initially, like rightfully, is like this doesn't feel right, but then she's eventually convinced by the elder, just like, don't worry, like get your stuff, and we'll drive you to the train station. And then later on, we hear a woman screaming in the distance, and we never see Connie again.
That be her.
Meanwhile, Mark unknowingly pees on the ancestral tree.
He pisses on the tree where all of the ancestors' ashes are buried.
Yeah, it's so good.
And the thing that makes me love it so much is that Mark is played by, I forget his name.
Oh, Will Poulter.
But he's the guy who is the bad kid in every single teen drama ever from the early 2000s, and he's got very annoying eyebrows. And he's got the kind of face, and he knows it, and he's a very good actor, who you're just like, I hate you when you see him.
He's vaping in like every scene. Like the elders are talking to him, and he's like vaping.
He's vaping. And he pees on this tree, and a normal person, even arguably Mark earlier in the film would have said, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I peed on that tree. I didn't know." But because this is Will Poulter and he wants to have a moment, he's like, "I didn't know. Why didn't you? It's just a tree. I pissed on the tree. What do you want from me? It's dead. Look at it. It's a dead tree. Who the fuck cares?" It's so good. It's so good.
Yes. But then, so later on, he incites the fury of the commune, and later on, he's lured by one of the women of the commune away during a meal, which is also another weird, funny line because she like tells him to come, and he's like, "What?" And she goes, "I'll show you." And he turns, he goes, "I'll be right back. She's going to show me." And
She's going to show me.
Leaves, and then we never see Mark again until Josh sneaks off to take a picture of a sacred text that he was previously told not to, because he's trying to get like a one-up on Christian now. And then somebody bursts into the temple where it is, and he thinks it's Mark. But then when he gets closer, we see it as somebody wearing Mark's clothes and skinned face. And then he bludgeons Josh to death and drags his body away.
Yeah. And it is not just someone. It is very clearly a person who's named, who I don't remember their name.
Yeah, I didn't put it in the
referred
outline
to as
either.
like the oracle, who is a person who helps write the sacred script that they keep, and they are a deliberate product of incest. And
because I think it leads to like an
wild.
unclouded mind or something, right?
Right. Which I mean, I would argue probably more of a clouded mind. I would say generally those born of incest probably slightly more clouded than other people.
Yeah.
I'm sure they're fine. But the whole sequence, it feels very traditional horror movie. You see him speak with the elder and read the text and say, "Can I take a picture?" And he goes, "No, of course not. Why would you say that?" And he goes, "Oh, okay, sure." And you immediately are like, "Oh, he's gonna try and take a picture, isn't he?"
Yeah, that's I think
does.
the one thing where like that's a straightforward dumb horror movie decision.
Yeah, for sure.
He almost gets away with it, but then he doesn't.
He almost gets away for it if it weren't for that pesky oracle.
Yeah. So the next
Mark's
day,
skin.
with Mark and Josh and Simon and Connie all missing, Danny is given more psychedelics and ends up winning a maypole dancing competition where they basically get super high on the psychedelics and they have to like dance around in circles until they fall down, and the last one standing is crowned the May Queen.
Which, Adam, you and I have talked a lot about it.
It's not how we do the
like,
maypole.
No, but I was also like, oh, they're not actually doing a maypole dance. And then they started to do the like spinning thing, and I was like, oh, they are doing a maypole dance.
Yeah, they don't do the ribbons,
this does feel very familiar.
But
yeah, that's sad.
So anyhow, this is cause for great celebration, and Pele kisses her. He's like, "Wow, you're the May Queen," and like kisses her, and the whole commune's celebrating. She doesn't understand like what she just did or why it's so good, but so they give her this flower crown and they take her to bless the crops, while Christian is also given drugs. And then another weird scene of comedy where he's like sitting at the table, high out of his mind on these psychedelics, and he turns to an old man and he goes, "Excuse me, like what's going on?" And the old man claps in his face, and Christian goes, "Why would you do that?
Why would you do that?" Ezra talked about that scene throughout the movie, and it's like, when does this happen? It's the best part. It's so good, and the storyline of the thing that's about to happen is we saw at some point this like ritual shown on a blanket, wherein like we see this kind of sequence of events and all these things they're supposed to do, and then we're shown that somebody put a rune underneath Christian's bed, this girl, and Josh keeps it from him because he wants to know, he wants the like academic reason for it without actually pissing off Christian, and asks Pele, and Pele's like, "Oh, it's a love rune. Somebody's trying to, get in on Christian." And it's portrayed as like a young woman doing silly stuff.
Yeah.
Without like knowing that this is a cult, but it's not really magic. It won't actually work. And then it works.
Yeah. Well, because Christian is given psychedelics and assaulted, basically, because he's coerced into this sex ritual with this woman named Maja, who, in order to get her pregnant, and they have sex while some of the other women dance naked around them while it's happening. And at one point they she comes around behind him and she like pushes his butt to like make him and help him.
And it seems like that's also after the same woman who seems to be like Maja's mother, which is super wild, like holds her face. It is just, it is a surreal scene.
It's crazy.
It is the scene
it's so surreal that you forget almost. And I think that's where this like good for her thing comes in at the end. Because not that like Christian is not a terrible stink garbage diaper man, but he is
Right, of
effectively
course.
assaulted in this scene.
Right.
And
He's
you
still a
almost
person
that
who
almost
does not
leaves your
deserve
brain
to
because
be-
of how buck wild everything else is that's going on.
Right. And it really seems like the moment at which, I mean, during the maypole scene that you're starting to go down this spiral of like, okay, stuff's getting wild. And then that scene serves as, again, this kind of tone shift of like, this is about to go crazy and I'm not going to give you any runway to get ready.
Yeah. And then when Danny discovers this, of course, like we don't know if she knows that Christian has been drugged, but she has a panic attack and is comforted by some of the other women who like get on the ground with her and wail with her in sympathy. In my favorite scene of the movie, as they like breathe in and out with her and wail with her, which I think is honestly like one of her it's her breaking point, where like nobody's done like. Of course, nobody's literally wailed in sympathy with her before, but like nobody has, quote, supported her like this before. Because it's not real support, but it's like nobody has done something like this. Nobody has tried to feel what she's feeling before. Even Pele says he has, but she hasn't seen evidence of it.
Right. It is the moment that like Tisch School of Drama would have called like all of your walls are now broken down.
Yeah.
And you're kind of getting rebuilt back up. And it is, again, it's something that like the effort of like wailing in sympathy is something that is so that it's this idea of that a lot of people have, especially nowadays, especially not to dunk on y'all, but liberals have this feeling that they can feel exactly what every single other person is feeling, and that's enough. It is almost a parody of that, presented as some odd tradition of a cult, which is just, it is probably my favorite scene in the movie as well. And wait, and before you come for me, I need to be very clear. I'm not saying liberals, because you guys are to the left of me. That would be whack.
Yeah, that would be whack.
You guys are to the right of me. That's why it's a whole thing.
That would be a terrible thing to drop on episode 47. Anyway.
47 we reveal.
So after the ritual, Christian kind of like comes down from his high and tries to run away naked. Only to discover, and apparently like in the script he had like put his clothes back on, but Jack Rayner was like, this should be naked. Like I should do this naked. And Ari Aster was like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, he wouldn't have had the time. Like, why would he put back on his clothes?
Yeah. Only to discover that Simon in a barn who has been turned into a blood eagle, which, if you don't know, is like an alleged like Viking punishment. We don't actually have evidence that they did it, but they might have. Where like the back split open and the spine is out, and you're hanging up, and it's very bloody. He's got flowers in his eyes. And then he also sees Josh's leg poking out of the ground near some crops. And some people have also pointed out that they think that they can see Simon breathing in this scene, and an inclination of him maybe being kept alive somehow. I don't know. Like, I don't know
either.
How you could be kept alive during this, but...
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be left possible, because it's also like the kind of energy of him being splayed out like this is that he's also in some way feeding the animals.
Yes.
Right? That the animals are serving as... like he is literally serving as a feed trough for these animals. And I think the idea is like he might be still alive in a way that's like he will be able to keep providing food and like without going like rotten.
Yeah. And then Christian is caught by an elder and paralyzed by him.
With just
drug,
with just some dust.
Yeah, like, he like blows dust in his face and Christian becomes paralyzed.
Yeah, and Ezra immediately went, if that was paralyzing dust, you wouldn't put that close to your face to blow it at somebody.
That's fair.
I was like, I mean, that's fair.
So once Danny is back from blessing the crops and the commune all comes back together to tell Danny that the festival concludes with 9 human sacrifices. 4 of them must be outsiders. So Mark, Josh, Simon, and Connie. And we see them loading their bodies onto like wheelbarrow, and we see like Connie's kind of like water bloated, so they probably drowned her. Like I think the theory is that they tied her up and drowned her in the river. And then also they put a jester hat on Mark, which is like adding insult to injury.
And it belongs.
So the first 4 must be outsiders lured by members. So these were lured by both Pele and Ingmar. While the next 4 must be members of the commune. So the 2 that jumped and then 2 that volunteer for the privilege. One of them being Ingmar, who volunteers to have himself sacrificed. And then Danny gets to choose the 9th victim, either Christian or another villager. And we don't see her make the choice, which, like...
But we all know.
The selfish part of me wishes that we did, but I know just for the movie, they didn't need to show us her making the choice, but I wanted to see it. But so she chooses Christian, who is still paralyzed, and they stuff him inside that disemboweled bear that we see earlier.
I thought that when he was being like seduced and put into the not seduced, assaulted and put into the building with Maja, I thought the bear was gonna come and maul him. I thought they were done with him and they were just gonna kill him. But no. Because I knew he, like, for some reason I said it like maybe 20 minutes into the movie, I was like, he's the bear. Like, that's him. And then he ended up in the bear. He ended up as the bear.
So yeah, they put him into this disemboweled brown bear, and they place in this temple that we saw earlier, this yellow triangle temple, which I have a sticker of on my laptop, along with the bodies of Josh, Simon, Connie, and Mark, and then the 2 live sacrifices. And like Devin said, they give them this U under their tongue to Y-E-W, under their tongue to, like, they tell them, like, so you won't feel any pain. We find out that that's not true because when they set the temple aflame, one of them starts screaming in pain when the flame reaches him, and Ingmar realizes, like, oh, the U does nothing. And on the outside, the commune members mimic the cries and screams of those alive inside, and Danny initially starts sobbing and panics in absolute horror, and she's in this big flower dress, like huge dress made of flowers, and she's like crawling across the ground in this big flower dress as she's sobbing, and then she like looks back and she gradually like begins to break into this smile, and that is the end of the movie. Yeah.
And at the end of that movie, I was like, I feel good about this. Good for her.
Yeah, my thing about the good for her thing is that, like, I get it as like a joke of like good for her, because you do kind of feel that. But my problem with it is that, like, I wouldn't want people to mistake what Danny received from the Harga as actual emotional support, because it wasn't. It was manipulation. Sure.
Right. And
that might make you feel like you were supported, but they're just bending and twisting you past your breaking point so that you will accept whatever the cult wants you to do.
And the phrase good for her is like a purposeful like de-nuance of the film. Like it's like, that's kind of I think we all know that is a good goof that we all do.
I adore this movie. Hopefully that you've already watched these if you've made it to the end and you didn't have it all spoiled for you. But even if you did, go back and watch them if you haven't seen them. They're very dark, very intense horror films, but so good.
But they're so good.
And I cannot wait to see what Ari Aster does next. He is coming out with another movie, I think in 2022, that hasn't started production yet, but I really hope it's good as these first 2.
Something tells me it will be. We have gone long on this episode, so we're going to end it there. Go and watch them. They're very good. But if you enjoyed this episode of The Great American Scream, you can leave a rate and review on iTunes or follow us on Spotify, or, leave a review wherever you happen to get your podcasts. And the best way to spread the word about the show, which we would really appreciate if you did, is to tell a friend. Adam, can you pimp our social medias, please?
Yes, you can follow us on Facebook at The Great American Scream, or more frequently on Twitter and Instagram at Great Scream Pod. Let us know if you enjoyed like this kind of like film analysis-y episode like this. They will not be this long in the future, because I imagine if we do it again, we won't be covering 2 movies.
We'll do 1 movie, yeah.
It will just be 1 movie. But if you like this, let us know. And if you didn't like it, you can let us know too. No problem. You can tweet at us or post using the hashtag TGAS. And as always, if there is something that you would like to hear about on the show, let us know, because your suggestion may become a topic for a future episode.
Yeah, and special thank yous, as always, go out to Michael Segudo for doing our disclaimer, Stevie Viola for doing our intro and outro music, and to our patrons. Thank you to Ben, Eric, Casper, Bree, Gail, Joyce, Brucker, Melinda, and Chris.
Yes, and thank you, patrons who sent us pictures of your stickers. Somebody took their sticker to a graveyard, like put it on their water bottle and took it to a graveyard. Very metal sick of you. Very cool. Thank you for that.
Yeah, enjoy the stickers. Enjoy the graveyards. I've been Devin Wright.
I've been Adam O'Connell.
And hopefully you have been spooked.
And hopefully you feel held in a real way.
And if you're going to go to a graveyard with our very cool stickers, how are you going to do it, Adam?
Oh, please do it safely.
Please, God.